being 13 as I was, and 14 and 15 and 16. Probably the biggest impact, I think, at that stage to do with age would have actually been in how much people were willing to believe that it was really going on. Because I think people's stereotype of people in pain and people in chronic pain is, the 65-year-old truck driver who hurt his back in an industrial accident or something like that. And so being female, sadly, probably had something to do with the way I was treated in terms of people sort of not believing me or thinking I was a bit weak or thinking I was a bit soft.
I'd have to say that it's affected my social life, my activities, my friends in a major way. I lost the majority of my friends from it because my social life became nil. The pain stopped me from doing the majority of things.
For me, it's really, really been difficult. And before I got ill, I loved cooking and I loved making lots of massive, big, beautiful meals. I was actually 20 kilos heavier than I am now. I was very kind of, do all that kind of thing. And when I got ill, I suddenly had to kind of look at the things that I enjoyed, because I derived a lot of my enjoyment from eating food, I guess, you could say. Yeah. And, going out and having a glass of wine with friends and that kind of thing.
I feel like I missed out on my early 20s and that part of my life. But also at the very beginning of my 20s, I felt quite older because I had to grow up very quickly, because I was thrown into a situation where I had to deal with a lot of medical problems. And while I had my family there, I was effectively, because I was over 18, I was an adult, and therefore I had to deal with it.
Because I was young, I didn't have access to choose what research I wanted to access, because my parents had the money, for medical services, and it was their insurance and their Medicare card. And my parents were wonderfully supportive, but at the same time, I couldn't just sort of choose, okay, tomorrow I'm going to go do this. I had to go through the process of convincing them that it was worth it and feeling guilty that I was using their money because it wasn't my money. And that was a big impact on me.
When I was first sick, I don't think I got out of bed for the first 6 months. I really didn't know how to get up every day and feel sick. I didn't know how to get up and get dressed. It seemed impossible. From a young age, you're used to this idea that when you're sick, you go to bed and you spend that time, recovering in bed, and then you'll get out and you'll be well, and that's fantastic, and you'll be back to full health. And so I couldn't kind of figure out how do I live my life and feel this sick.
As the condition spread, it's impacted on my social life enormously, to the point now I cannot make any plans until I go to get out of bed in the mornings. My activities are very limited now, but I feel that it's very important to find what I can do and to learn the new activities.
Pain-wise, you don't get to choose when you can do things. That takes over your body. So you can make plans, but you might not be able to keep them.
Young people's activities tend to be more physical, not in the sense that they're necessarily running a marathon, but, they're walking around at a shopping centre for hours, or they're going to a concert where you're standing up, or they're going to even just the movies where you have to sit for 2.5 hours, whatever, straight. And so a lot of the things that people enjoyed, it's not that I didn't enjoy them, I actually did in theory, but they were just really, really hard for me to do. And so people would sort of stop inviting me to things because they were trying to be understanding, in the sense that they thought, well, Jen can't or doesn't like to sit in movies for 2.5 hours, so we won't invite her. I do like to, it's hard, but I would still appreciate, the invitation.
I think that when you start becoming kind of chronically unwell, it sounds silly because there are so many other people experiencing it, but you feel like, you're going through all these things you've never gone through before, and you feel really isolated. I felt like every time I was going out that there was almost a piece of glass separating me from everybody else, because I just couldn't, I thought, I'm trying to make it through the day without, I'm just trying to make it through the day. That's my goal. And my goal is probably so different to everybody else's goal. I'm just trying to make it through the day without having a massive flare-up.
Socially, how it's affected me is I've actually found who out of my friends is willing to go the distance to keep that friendship alive.
During high school, it was such a secret. Tell anybody. I just did what I did, and I'd do the whole PE class, and then at the end I'd go and get changed in the cubicle, not because I was embarrassed, but because I had to cry or I had to vomit because I was in that much pain. And so I just did high school and people didn't know, so people couldn't tease me for what I had because they didn't know, but they certainly thought I was weird for reasons that were about my condition.
And in my case, I know that I've had to move back home because I need to be cared for, probably 80% of the time. It makes things really difficult to do. The little things like going to the pub with your mates.
Wine and food is a huge part of social interaction, and when you pull that out of the equation, it becomes really quite very, very stressful and very awkward and very strange, and it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable with it, and it's taken a long time for the people around me to feel comfortable with me not being able to eat the same things, or quite often when I go out with friends I just don't eat. I tend to order a cup of hot water and that's about it. I'll have some rice if the restaurant serves rice, but because even a little bit of something that I'm intolerant to can make me so sick or send me home, basically I just have to be so incredibly careful. So I have to eat at places I really trust, and I know that they're going to prepare the food without putting on pepper or doing something that I know is going to cause me to go into a flare-up.
It might sound like a silly point to make, but to go out and have a drink with your friends when you're in your early 20s isn't a big deal, but it is part of your life, and certain medications you can't drink.
Yeah.
And if you're responsible enough to abide by those sort of limitations.
There's things that I do that are to do with my pain that people think are just weird things about me that they think make me odd. And they used to show up a lot in school, because people would want to wear, they still had to wear school shoes because they had a uniform, but they wanted to wear the nice, pretty school shoes. And I couldn't wear the nice, pretty school shoes because I had to have orthotics and I had to have proper supportive shoes, and I couldn't have a heel on my shoes. And so people thought I had no fashion sense, when in reality I knew that what I was wearing wasn't the coolest shoe in the world. But
Great point.
Really have a choice. And even the backpacks that I would carry, I would carry a very proper sort of effective supportive backpack when I was carrying stuff for school and that, because that's what I had to do, because I decided in the end with the amount of pain that I was in that the pain wasn't worth the cool factor. So I was this uncool kid, because I couldn't wear skirts and dresses when I went out with my friends because I couldn't wear the shoes that go with it. I think it was a lot of subtle things like that, and I would fidget in class a lot because sitting down for a long time was hard for me, so they thought I was just this weird kid who fidgeted a lot and couldn't sit still. And so it was a bunch of stuff that I recognised were weird, but if people had known really why I was doing it, probably would have been a lot more forgiving than they were.
All my close friends have known me before and after my illness. So for them it's been, trying to kind of trying to acclimatise to the kind of person I've become as a result of my situation. They've been absolutely wonderful and really supportive, and they've totally gone the journey with me.
I was fortunate enough to see friends that I hadn't seen in over a year last night, and I asked a friend about how his trip to the Middle East was, thinking that he came back recently, only to find out it was a year and a half ago. You lose time a lot when you are not doing anything, in my particular case, of value. I don't see myself doing anything of value at the moment. It's been really difficult, and particularly really difficult to keep friends.
Once I got older, in university, and I was sort of 17, 18, 19, people started knowing, because that was when I did eventually at 20 get diagnosed, but it was certainly when I was being more outspoken and saying, well, hang on, I can't live like this forever. I have to do something. I have to tell people because maybe someone will know something. And I just decided that it was worth being honest.
It's definitely a two-way street, but when you're fogged up and your mind is sort of overtaken by medication and the words don't come out of your mouth properly, and half the time you don't even know what you're saying.
And it was in the process of that I learned the old cliche that things like this will teach you who your real friends are.
I had to argue with them with my shoulder They kept telling me it was within my head, but it felt like and jamming in my shoulder itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I pushed it, and they found after X-ray that I had spurs in my shoulder, and then they also found this ultrasound that I had impingement of the shoulder. And this was a direct result of wrenching the tendon in the initial injury. It went up into that area and did it. And it was like, okay, she's telling the truth. Now we don't know how to deal with her.
Largely, I was very ashamed of the situation I was in because it was considered by most of the medical professionals I had seen to be not real. On their definition of real being an easy physiological thing that they can point out on a scan or a blood test or something like that. And because it wasn't real, I was very ashamed to talk about it because I knew people's next assumption would be it's a psychosomatic thing, it's in my head, it's a mental health thing, I'm crazy, I'm seeking attention, whatever you want to make from that. None of those judgments is something anybody wants to attract. You know, the stigma shouldn't be there in the case of mental health and stuff, but it is, especially when you're 13.